Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we're going to take a look at some fungus. Now, what am I talking about? I am talking about Kaiju number 8, as you probably figured out by now. But we're going to go take a look at that fungus Kaiju that the Division 3 fought in Kafka's very first real engagement with the Division. Now, why? Because fungus are awesome. They're popping up all over the ground outside my house and my neighbor's houses in the Pacific Northwest, and it's relevant to this chapter. So in this chapter, we get a look at the Japanese coastal defenses. They have what they call beast barriers, which appear to be 2 layers of artificial reefs, I'm assuming concrete and steel, maybe reinforced with kaiju technology, that are meant to keep beast-type kaiju out of Tokyo Bay. Now that makes sense. You've got a lot of important infrastructure there. You don't want a kaiju just coming in and crushing everything like I'm sure they have in the past. And so the first line of defense is a passive barrier. Probably prevents erosion in the bay, which is a huge problem too. So you have these barriers, and as we can see, the Godzilla type kaiju has just crushed through the first barrier, so it's clearly there just to slow it down. It probably does stop the smaller ones, though it makes me wonder if it stops the small one and the small one just starts circling around, how do they go out and get it? Maybe there are special naval units. Maybe Division 2 is a naval unit with boats and torpedoes, and they just go out and harpoon kaiju that don't make it past the beast barrier. Who knows? But you have these beast barriers. Now, clearly, if you put an adjective in front of a noun, you're specifying that. So this is a barrier to keep beasts out. So what is it not keeping out? Because if you have a beast barrier, you'll have other kind of barriers as well. Well, I believe the answer is fungal type kaiju, like the giant one we saw Mina take down. Now, here's the question. If Japan has these awesome coastal defenses, and the 1st Division doesn't let anything get past it, how did that fungal kaiju get so far inland and to take out that city? Well, I think the secret lies in what a fungus is, and this is one of my absolute favorite topics. I am a biologist by trade, but not by choice, but by necessity. I have been a botanist for the past 15 years of my career. And every single year, we learn more and more about how important mycorrhizal networks are to every single ecosystem. Now, if you go out and work in your garden, you will feel happy out of proportion to just getting a job done. So many people still have gardens in this day and age when they're completely unnecessary and often a drain on finances, because in the garden live little microorganisms, including the mycorrhizal fungus. And when you get it on your hands and up into your air passages, it makes you feel better. It makes you healthier. It makes you mentally more stable and happier. And that's just one example of the mycorrhizal and how they affect each other. In the great forests of the Pacific Northwest, the great temperate rainforests, all of the trees are connected by a myriad of fungal species. Now, when you say fungus, you generally think mushrooms or mold. And what we actually think of when we think of those are the fruiting bodies, the reproductive organs. The actual fungus lives underground and does not have a singular body. It is these networks, these lines all running through the ground like a nervous system from tree to tree. And this allows the entire forest to essentially be considered one living organism, with all the trees talking to each other. If a tree is sick, the forest will somehow make a decision using this mycorrhizal network, and it will either mercy kill the tree, drain it of its nutrients, and distribute its nutrients out to other trees, or it will support the tree and send nutrients to it to boost it back up. No one knows how it makes this decision. It's probably a complex network of chemical signals and physical signals and water availability, but we just don't know. Some of the communications these fungal networks can do, we have actually managed to really mark down and understand. For instance, there are certain parasites where if they attack the plant, be it a virus or even a bug, the plant will send the signals through the mycorrhizal network saying, "Help, I'm being attacked." And in this case, there's nothing the other plants can do, but they can defend themselves. They figured this out. They grew mustard plants, and they isolated mustard plants above ground, but they let their roots be connected by these mycorrhizal networks. And they put a parasite into one fungus and into one tobacco plant and made sure that the other tobacco plants weren't infected. But the other tobacco plants showed the same defense mechanism, because when infected with this parasite, the tobacco plants will release a chemical that helps to fight off the parasite. And even the uninfected tobacco plants did not started releasing that chemical. They didn't just sit there. So they were preparing themselves for in what a wild situation would be an inevitable infection. And they were able to do this because the other tobacco plant sent off scents. And plants can do this through the air with pheromones, but these mycorrhizal networks are incredibly important. You've heard of a spotted owl, probably, that famous little bird that's endangered in the Pacific Northwest. The spotted owl is part of a network that includes the Douglas fir trees, the flying squirrel, the spotted owl, and one of these mycorrhizal fungus. These fungus live in the roots of the Douglas fir trees. In symbiosis with them, they exchange nutrients with the Douglas fir trees. The flying squirrel lives in the fir trees and eats the fungus, and the owls eat the squirrel and nest in the Douglas fir trees. And when the owls eat the squirrel, it helps spread the fungus. And again, it's just part of this incredibly complex network that these mycorrhizal fungus have. Now, if you were to dig down into the ground, you probably couldn't find these mycorrhizal fungus. And we didn't know that they were there for pretty much all of human history, and we only learned that they were there recently. This is because until they're reproducing, these fungus exist as the finest thin hairs running through the soil, super thin, super tiny, easy to miss. And sometimes if you find a big cluster of them, you'll see them like really dense cobwebs in the soil, but for the most part you just can't see them. So circling back to Kaiju number 8 and the various Kaiju that we've seen so far, I believe the way that fungal Kaiju managed to get so far inland was that it probably was in that wispy, thready underbody form when it hit land. And who knows, it might have hit land as spores. I highly doubt that, because the Defense Force said they'd been tracking it ever since it left the fault it crawled out of and emerged from. And so that means that it had a form that could be tracked somehow. That's usually by sound, and wispy tendrils traveling through the ocean would be very difficult to track by sound. So probably it was making some noise, which implies a more solid body. But once it reached shore, all it would need to do would be get a few tendrils into the ground. Then it could travel underground, like Hoshina said it did, until it had gained enough mass to reproduce. And then all those tendrils start to gather the nutrients from the soil. They come up into a massive fruiting body and start reproducing. And then we see that awesome battle scene. So that is how I think that gigantic fungal kaiju got past the coastal defenses of Japan. Now, I assume that outside of Tokyo Bay, there are not as powerful defenses, and it could be something as simple as, like, further north and south of Tokyo Bay, the coastline is just not as well defended, and it's possible for something to crawl ashore. But more than likely, that fungal kaiju crept ashore as tendrils, maybe even came in underwater and never poked its head above ground at all until it was ready to reproduce. Now, this does raise the question. Kaiju number 9 said that he was personally responsible for the Yoju to that Hanju having reproductive organs. So the little fungal kaijus, the one we saw Vice Captain Hoshina dicing up and Kikoru blasting away, they had reproductive organs, which is not normal and not natural to that type of kaiju. And Kaiju number 9 claims that he put them there. And I really wonder at what point he did put them there, because you have the original kaiju comes out of the trench. I can't remember what trench they said. I'm actually going to Google it later to see if it's a real trench or not. It swims up to the shore, gets down to the shore by hook or crook, either by being small and fast enough to dodge the shore patrols, or by being in its tendril form and just creeping up through the sand until it can get to the more fertile, richer soil. Anyway, it gets up there. It moves around underground until it reaches its reproductive form. And then there's just a few hours between the time it's spotted and between the time Mina blasts it to smithereens. And what was going on? At what point during that time frame did Kaiju number 9 crawl inside that fungal kaiju and mess around with its reproductive organs. Because it would make a lot more sense that kaiju number 9 actually tweaked the reproductive organs of the one kaiju rather than tweaking the reproductive organs of all of those countless spawn, as Vice Captain Hoshina called them. So, those are my questions. How did Kaiju number 9 get all those countless spawns to have reproductive organs? And what do you think? Do you think that those fungal kaiju came on land as in the thin tendril stage? Are you creeped out now that you know that every forest you ever walked on, every farmyard, every meadow has a fungal network underneath that is going to start sending up little mushroom heads? And while it's doing that, the trees are speaking to each other all around you in a voice that we have only just begun to recognize, let alone begun to be able to hear. So, what do you think? Well, while you're mulling over that, if you want to find out about a life form based on this theory of a mycorrhizal network, a sapient life form, you can go check out my book, Humans Are Weird. I Have the Data, a book of human absurdity, available in Audible, ebook, and print fashion. Check out the links below the video, and peace out, my wonderful viewers.
The book from author Betty Adams, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, is a humorous look at human behavior through the eyes of aliens. This book is arranged in separate reports or essays, documenting the experiences with humanity through the lens of the aliens who have to interact with them. This anthology of short stories and vignettes from alien points of view highlights some of humanity's quirks we can all relate to. Author Betty Adams captures how strange and interesting humans can really be. This is a fun collection of stories you will really get a kick out of. Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, from author Betty Adams. Order your copy right now on Amazon.